Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner, and this is Tour of Lombardy 2022. Now, this is one of the big 5 monument races, and it's the last race of the 2022 season when you're talking about the big showdowns between all the big riders here in the European peloton. Now, Lombardy is a special moment, and this particular day here at Tour of Lombardy is even more special because Alejandro Valverde, Vincenzo Nibali will both be retiring at the end of this season. So this is their last big professional racing in the European peloton. Let me remind you guys, it's a bit of a special moment for me because it was Vincenzo Nibali second on the general classification and Alejandro third when I won the Vuelta in 2013. And with Alejandro Valverde retiring, he was the only rider that's capable of knocking me off the oldest Grand Tour winner in the galaxy. And with him going, that means I only have to worry about Primoz Roglic. And Roglic is like 32 years old, so I got another 10 years till I have to worry about losing that little record I hold of the oldest rider in the galaxy to win a Grand Tour. Now, we're going to expect big battles. Alejandro Valverde is showing good form. Vincenzo Nibali, I'm not certain about how his form will go, so we'll have to see how the 253-kilometer ride handles the legs there for Vincenzo Nibali when we're talking about trying to win. Let me remind you guys, Vincenzo Nibali's won the Lombardy 2 times in years past, 2017 and 2015. So can he finish his legendary career? 4-time Grand Tour champion Vincenzo Nibali is. Won the Tour de France in 2014. I was there that year. It was a spectacular race and probably the biggest battle that never happened in 2014 when we saw Alberto Contador and Chris Froome crash out early. But in my mind, Vincenzo Nibali would have won that Tour de France, and we missed probably the greatest battle in Tour de France history in 2014 with those 2 riders crashing out. Now, Alejandro Valverde, he's my favorite. I've loved the guy from the beginning of racing. He's all class. Anytime I've competed against him, I've always thought of Valverde as being 100% class. When you compare Vincenzo Nibali and Alejandro Valverde, Valverde's got 1 Grand Tour win, and like I said, Vincenzo Nibali has 4. But throughout the career of Alejandro Valverde, he's been able to win basically from January all the way to the end of October. So if I had to pick a career, personally, I'd take Alejandro Valverde's over Vincenzo Nibali, even though Vincenzo Nibali won the Tour de France. Probably giving up a lot of money by taking Alejandro Valverde over Vincenzo Nibali. But when you wake up every day and you pin your race numbers on and you know you can win like Alejandro Valverde has, he's won LBL, he's won Flèche Wallonne, and he's won Amstel Gold all in the same week, and he's backed those up with back-to-back wins throughout his whole career. So Valverde's a big favorite of mine. A little bit of tears in my eyes and a little bit of relief knowing that he's not going to be able to take my Grand Tour, oldest rider in the history to win a Grand Tour in the galaxy, that is. So now all I got to do is worry about Primoz Roglic. Let's get into the racing because there's going to be some exciting battles because this is the first time Jonas Vingegaard and, of course, Tadej Pogačar, the Slovenian, are going to battle against, since we've seen those 2 at the Tour de France here in 2022 when Jonas Vingegaard dislodged Tadej Pogačar on stage 11 of this year's Tour de France. Now, when the racing starts, we see 10 riders going up the road. The last rider to bridge that gap would be Pinto from AG2R. He'll do a spectacular job of bridging a 2-minute gap up to 9 riders up front and jumping on and just grabbing the tail end of that group with about 220 kilometers to go. Now, when we back the film up and we look at the peloton behind, we see it's 3 teams on the front. It's Movistar, of course, because Enric Mas is on form and Valverde is too. UAE Team Emirates with Tadej Pogačar and, of course, Jonas Vingegaard, who's come from his own kind of results because he was at the Croatian race where he was leading that race all the way into the last stage and lost it just on time bonuses. Now, we got 3 big teams riding the front, the gap up to those 10 riders. Maximum lead, just about 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Then after that, that time gap's going to start dropping back there because those 3 teams, they want to control this race and they want to bring it into the finish for Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard, and Enric Mas, all with a shot here of winning Tour of Lombardy, the last big monumental race here, 1-day monument race here in 2022. Now, with that time gap dropping down, we see a couple big crashes back there. It's Mikel Nieve for Caja Rural that he crashes, and this is a big shame because this was going to be his last big race because he's retiring at the end of the year season here too, along with Alejandro Valverde, his Spanish compatriot. Now he goes down, and then shortly after that, we're going to see Vivo crashing. Vivo goes down hard. We see the car on the right side of the road and his bike on the left, and Jumbo-Visma splitting between the two riders. Just up in front, we see his teammate up there on the left side of the road, hoping that Vivo is better off. The cameras look over at Vivo, and he's missing skin and missing his clothing all over the place down the front of him. This had to be a spectacular crash, but the cameras missed all the action because the roads here at Lombardy, they're narrow, they're twisty, they're steep, up, down, every direction possible except for wide and safe when you're racing here in Italy. Now up front, as we see, the riders are going through the feed zone. The time gap now, we know about a minute and a half that this front group of 10, they're absolutely going to get caught, and it's just whether or not if they can get over the Ghisallo. Now, the Ghisallo is one of the most famous climbs here in Italy, and they use it here at Tour of Lombardy every year. With 115 kilometers to go, after they go through the feed zone for the peloton, this is your last time to basically get any kind of relaxation before the real racing begins. They'll go through a tunnel at 85 kilometers to go. And that point is always, every year when I did Tour of Lombardy, is when I knew you absolutely have to be at the front. With that time gap dropping down massively and as fast as you can possibly imagine to 10 riders, we know the peloton's going to bring everything together, and the battle royale is going to start on the Ghisallo. Now it's curb to curb, fighting all the way down the coast. This is a crazy section because it's so technical and twisty, little bumps and risers. It's definitely not flat along the coast here in Italy, and there's no room to make a mistake. On the left side of the road, they got a cliff going straight up, and there's no place to crash except for into the rocks. On the right side of the road, you have a barrier and then a drop-off down into the lake. Now, there's the occasional opening for a small section when we're talking about between 85 kilometers and 70 kilometers to go when the climb starts proper. You have maybe 2 or 3 sections where the road might widen up for a brief second, and that's the only time you can get to the front. Now, with about 71 kilometers to go, we see that front group of 10, and they're certainly going to get caught as we see the group behind us motoring fast. When the peloton catches this 10 guys, I start to grimace a little bit sitting on the couch because I know what it's like on this road. And now the peloton has to fit 10 riders in front, dropping through the peloton like a rock. When we look and they come out, nobody crashes. And on the front, it's Ineos driving like crazy, getting ready to start the Ghisallo proper. Now, it's a left turn followed by a roundabout and then straight up the climb. And guess who gets on the front? It's Jumbo-Visma. They got a plan here for Jonas Vingegaard, and they want to make everything as hard as possible. Chris Harper's on the front. He's drilling it. We see Jumbo-Visma riders going out the back. And now all of a sudden, you got to ask yourself, if you're Jumbo-Visma, there's only 3 riders left in the peloton, and one is Jonas Vingegaard. That means you got 2 riders on the front, and one's Chris Harper. So how long can Chris Harper last when you're still talking 69 kilometers to go here at Tour of Lombardy? Now, this section of the climb, it comes in 2 parts. The first section, Chris Harper's drilling it like crazy. He's got the group down to about 70 riders back there. Then it's going to flatten out just a little bit. Now we see UAE, Team Emirates, Plan A, get on the front. They're ready to start drilling it, and it's Almeida on the front, the Portuguese rider. He's throwing down with everything. We see a little bit of a drag race there between Chris Harper from Jumbo-Visma and the UAE Team Emirates rider, and then finally Chris Harper blows when the climb starts back up. It goes up to the famous museum, the chapel up here at the top of the Ghisallo, and it's all switchbacks to the top. And with these switchbacks, you know it's steep. And with Almeida on the front, quality, one of the best riders in the world, drilling it for Tadej Pogacar behind, who's sitting on his teammates, 5 teammates in front of him. We see Almeida drill it, and over the top, he split guys off the back. This is when we see that it's Julian Alaphilippe off the back and about a 20 group rider back there, but with only 1 rider from UAE Team Emirates still riding the descent. He's riding fast, but 20 guys pulling back. We're going to see that small group of about 45 riders up there, and then that group of 20 is going to come back on, which means Jonas Vingegaard has Chris Harper back, and Julian Alaphilippe is back in this race for Quick-Step. Now things start getting really interesting as we get ready to start the final descent before we get into the circuit finish here. Now, as we come into about 40 kilometers to go, it's curb to curb. We see the big-time battles between all the teams, so we know it's getting nervous now. There's Ineos on the right side. Then we see UAE Team Emirates, Bora Hansgrohe, who've come here with a stacked team to try to help Vlasov and Sergio Higuita try to win here at Tour of Lombardy. They're at the front fighting for real estate here, curb to curb, coming in to this big final descent before we start the last 30-kilometer circuit here at Lombardy. they'll come down off this descent. And you see the group's probably about 30, 35 riders right now. It's getting tiny because it's technical and crazy here at Tour of Lombardy. The guys from behind, they're having a problem getting back on. Now we're getting ready to start the first of the circuit climbs here up to San Fremo. Now this climb is just under 3 kilometers long, about 7% in average, but it goes up to 10%. When I spend some time living here in Como, I train this one often, and it's very difficult. And again, it's in this tight little valley with a highway where you pass underneath it, and then you climb all the way up with no space on either side because the valley road is so small. Now you get up to the top, you see it's UAE team members, and they're driving it all the way through this climb. As they summit, they still got their team intact. We're talking 5, 6 riders on the front still for Tadej Pogačar. This is a golden plan for UAE team members. They have been spot on tactically throughout all the first 230 kilometers here at Tour of Lombardy. They'll drop down the descent, and we see it's Mark Hirschi on the front, still drilling it like crazy. When they come through the finish line, though, Bora Hansgrohe wants some action. They get their guys lined up, 3 guys on the left side of the road. UAE team members fighting against them on the right, but losing the battle to the Bora Hansgrohe team. Now, just after the finish line with 20 kilometers to go, they're getting ready to start the penultimate climb here at Tour of Lombardy. This climb is steep and hard at 4 kilometers long and about 10%. We know it's a legitimate climb. It's a hard left, technical, tight turn. And when we see the peloton go through, Bora Hansgrohe have done an exceptional job for 2 kilometers since they crossed the finish line here at Tour of Lombardy of getting their guys to the front. UAE team members are still lined up there, and they got Rafał Majka, and he's interested in patrolling the front. We'll see Fabron from Bora Hansgrohe. He'll throw in the first attack, and then Rafał Majka starts going to work. Now, at this point in time in the race, we're getting near the finish. Tadej Pogačar has not had to touch the wind throughout the whole 232 kilometers of today's race in that Lombardy. So you know he's rested back there. The question is, does Jonas Vingegaard have Tour de France form? And can Enric Mas be able to distance Jonas Vingegaard or beat him at the finish like he did just weeks before when we're talking about at Emilia? Now the racing's full gas. Fabron's up there. We got Rafał Majka, who's doing an exceptional job of setting the pace. He catches Fabron. Fabron sets a little bit more tempo on the front and then finally pulls off hard. Now Davide Formula will take over for Rafał Majka, and he'll start drilling it just about 19 kilometers to go. When he pulls off, it's time for Tadej Pogačar to go to work, right? Tadej Pogačar throws in a big acceleration. Mas is directly on his wheel. Mikel Landis holding off for Bahrain victorious. But guess what? Jonas Vingegaard missed the split. He's trying to jump across the gap, and just as he's coming up to the back end, Tadej Pogačar does a big acceleration, and we see that Jonas Vingegaard can't hold the speed as he drops off. Now, as he's dropping off, we got 3 riders in the front. Oh, let me fix that. It's only 2, because now Mikel Landis coming off too. Mikel Landa, though, he's not done. We see him adjust his sunglasses, wipe the sweat off his head, put his sunglasses back on as the 2 riders up front playing a little bit of cat and mouse because Mas, he doesn't want to go full gas with Tadej Pogačar, holding a little bit back. Tadej Pogačar will do some pulling. Mas will throw in attack. Then Tadej Pogačar is going to throw in a counterattack. And that's when we see Mikel Landa find his way back on. And then there's going to be another acceleration as we see Mas throwing down again, which will dislodge Mikel Landa. Now, Tadej Pogačar, he does his own attack again. They'll go over the top, basically ease off the gas just a little bit, and that'll allow Mikel Landa to get back on as they come down the descent. Just as they're coming down the descent, though, we'll see as Mikel Landa's starting to jump back on, Tadej Pogačar looks right over his shoulder, and he sees the gap start to open up to Enric Mas, and he starts to get on the pedals. But Landa knows the MO here of Tadej Pogačar. He closes the gap immediately. They come out of the next left. Tadej Pogačar throws in a big attack. But Landa, smart as he is for Bahrain victorious, he closed that gap right away because he knows Mas isn't the best of descenders. Now the 3 riders will get down to the bottom of the descent. And when we go back and look at the group chasing behind, Jonas Vingegaard, who went up that climb and started to blow, couldn't close the gap. He got some company from Sergio Higuita, but couldn't hold the wheel. Those 2 went back to the group back there. And then we saw some other attacks, mainly from Bardet, from DSM, but he wasn't able to get away. That group comes down the descent because it's Valverde back there that's doing a spectacular job of covering everything up front. Now, this is the question, though, when you're looking at the 3 up front, because Enric Mas doesn't have the speed to beat Tadej Pogačar in the sprint. Mikel Landa doesn't have the speed to beat Tadej Pogačar in the sprint. or the speed to be able to drop him up the climb. So what would be the MO for Movistar? If I'm sitting here up on the podium of the butterfly effect and you're going 100% for the win, I'm saying you got to sit up. You got to let those groups come back together. You got to hope Valverde has something in the legs, and maybe some tactical attacks can get you a little more clear from Tadej Pogačar. Instead, Movistar's Enric Mas, he does work all the way through the valley from the penultimate climb all the way to the last, up there with Tadej Pogačar, and Mikel Landa does too. Then when we start the final climb for the second time here on the circuit of Tour of Lombardy, we're going up. It's 7.5 kilometers to go. 3 riders, they've all pretty much worked even together. Mikel Landa's been hurting, but he's still on there. He'll start sitting on going up this final climb. Then when we look back, it's Jonas Vingegaard throwing in attack with about 10 kilometers to go, but he can't get away. 2 other riders will go up the road, and they're both champions. It's Carlos Rodriguez from Team Ineos, Sergio Higuita, the Colombian rider from Bora Hansgrohe. Those 2 get away from the group, and they're chasing at about 30 seconds to the guys up front. Now, the guys up front, it's about 6 kilometers to go, and then this is when we see Mas throw in his plan. He's throwing in a big attack. He gaps off Landa right away, gets a little gap on Tadej Pogačar, but can't quite hold this. Tadej Pogačar comes back to him. Mikel Landa's doing everything he can fighting back there. He knows this climb's only 2.5, 3 kilometers long, but it's a steep, hard one as he's fighting to get back on. Just as he starts closing up to the 2 riders up front, Mas throws in another big attack, and this will dislodge Landa for good as he's back there struggling. He can't close the gap. We see it's Tadej Pogačar when they come out of the right turn with just a couple 100 meters to go. He's going to summit with about 5 kilometers to go, but he wants one more big attack on Mas. He throws down everything he can. Mas holds the wheel, and the 2 riders go over the summit, the last summit here at Tour of Lombardy, with 5 kilometers to go with about 15-second gap on Mikel Landa. When we look further back behind Landa, you got to go back to about 50 seconds back there. We see Sergio Higuita still battling. He's still got Carlos Rodriguez with him from Team Ineos for company. And then everyone else is about 1 minute and 15 seconds back that has Alejandro Valverde in that group. Up front, they drop down the descent. Mas is still rotating through. Now, there's been a lot of questions. I'm not certain if Mas should have ever taken a pull with Tadej Pogačar after they went over the penultimate climb. But he has, and it's now he's in trouble because we're starting the last descent. There's no more room here. He knows he's got to pull because you got Mikel Landa right back there that can get on, cost him a second place on the stage finish here. Or, even worse yet, Sergio Higuita has a ton of speed, and he's only about 35 seconds behind the riders up front. Now, we come down to 1.3 kilometers to go. This is the last time Mas is going to take a pull. Tadej Pogačar goes to the front. He pulls under the 1K kilometer banner to go. And at about 200 meters to go, Mas is going to throw in his big acceleration to try to win here at Tour of Lombardy. They'll come up side by side, but Tadej Pogačar will start his sprint. They're almost touching elbows. Tadej Pogačar sits down in the saddle, does one more acceleration, gets the gap there on Mas, looks back over the left side to see he's got Mas beat, sits up and celebrates a back-to-back victory here because he won last year in 2021 at Lombardy to get a second win here in 2022. Now, second on the stage, of course, is Enric Mas, rolls through for second. Mikel Landa, Bahrain victorious, third at this year's Giro d'Italia, ends up third here at Lombardia. And then behind, Sergio Higuita beats Carlos Rodriguez at the finish. Now, when we go back to the next group, Alejandro Valverde comes through for sixth on today's Tour of Lombardy finish. Along with him for companies is going to be Mollema. Rudy Millard, eighth on today's Lombardy. Good result for Rudy Millard. Bardet, ninth. Adam Yates will get 10th to round out the top 10 here at Lombardy. Then we got to go back to 16th to see Jonas Vingegaard from Jumbo-Visma, who got dropped on the last climb out of that group when the attack started from Bardet. So he finishes 16th on today's stage after Jumbo-Visma did the bulk of the work here along with Movistar and UAE Team Emirates. Fantastic day of racing. When I break the tactics down, it was something marvelous. Tadej Pogačar, you were exceptional. UAE Team Emirates, this was book 101 on how to race your bike properly in the European peloton. When you're the best rider in the field, you have nothing to worry about. When you got the speed, sprint finish, if you can't get rid of Mas, so what? You beat him in the sprint. You don't have to panic. And Movistar, I don't know if it was quite my tactics if you're going 100% for the win, but when you're guaranteed a second at Lombardy, it's hard to argue when they've been fighting for UCI points, and you're guaranteed so many UCI points if Mas can finish second or podium here at Lombardy. So, Nobody's knuckleheads. I loved all the racing. Moss was climbing right there with Tadej Pogacar all the way to the line. Certainly he's on fabulous form. With his teammate Valverde finishing 6th, Movistar gained some valuable UCI points when we're talking about that battle for staying in the Pro Tour, which they safely are in there at this moment. But remember, there's another 3 years coming up. So you always got to keep getting points when you're trying to survive in the European peloton. Behind, when I talk about the tactics from Jumbo-Visma, and even from Bora Hansgrohe, I'm not big fans of how they did it, because you're pulling Tadej Pogacar around. And possibly if you wouldn't have done that work earlier on the Ghisallo, maybe you can play some more tactics and some more attacks throughout the stage. But nobody's knuckleheads. Fantastic racing, and we saw great battles from Moss, Tadej Pogacar, and Mikel Landa coming out of the blue skies here to get a great result at Lombardy. Afterwards in their interview, Tadej Pogacar said he enjoyed today. He thought they raced it fantastic. His team was amazing throughout the whole 253 kilometers. Valverde gave a great touching interview, talked about enjoying all his time, his accomplishments that he'd had throughout his career. Enric Mas having a great race on today's Tour of Lombardy. We'll miss you, Valverde. Fantastic champion, epic rider. I enjoyed racing against you throughout all of my career. Appreciate you being on the podium with me here at the Vuelta, and I know your career far surpasses mine, but I'm still the oldest winner in the galaxy of any Grand Tours out there, and Vincenzo Nibali's leaving too. Primoz Roglic decides to retire a little bit sooner. I'll get to keep this jersey for even longer. So today was a great moment sitting on the couch. Valverde, you're the best. Loved racing. Vincenzo Nibali, appreciated all the time racing against you, most of the time getting beat. And then, of course, Tadej Pogacar, we see the up-and-coming riders riding fantastic again. He is the next Eddie Merckx out there, the #1 rider in the world, Tadej Pogacar. There's no doubt about it. And, of course, I'm going to go ahead and list second as Primoz Roglic. Third is a little bit hard. Is it Jonas Vingegaard or is it Remco Evenepoel? I'm going to go Remco Evenepoel because he had a better season when we're talking about all the wins he had throughout the year. Of course, one being the Rainbow Bands and the Vuelta win. And then Jonas Vingegaard 4th when we're talking about the best riders for the 2022 season. And Wout van Aert, you can throw him in there somewhere, but he's a one-day racer and I'm a stage racer. So he's got to be at least 5th, right? Anyways, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next edition of the Butterfly Effect sometime in the future, because this was the last race of the professional season. So the Butterfly Effect's getting wrapped up here for 2022. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys real soon.